What would you do if a wild elephant mother, an animal who has every reason to fear humans, walked straight out of the savanna and blocked your path? Not to attack, but to beg for help. In the heart of East Africa, as the sun bled into the horizon and predators closed in, one desperate mother made a choice no one believed was possible. A baby elephant lay dying. A pride of lions waited in the dark. And a seasoned ranger faced a moment that would change everything he thought he knew about the wild. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. Stay with me because what happened next is one of the most astonishing acts of courage and trust ever witnessed on the savanna. The sun was sinking behind the distant line of acacia trees, staining the vast East African savanna in a soft wash of amber and molten gold. Heat still clung to the plains rising from the baked earth in wavering ribbons, but the wind carried the first hint of evening coolness. It swept through the tall grasses in long, shimmering waves, creating a steady whispering sound that felt almost like the land itself was breathing. It was the hour when predators began to stir, when shadows lengthened and instincts sharpened. Yet for a moment, everything looked peaceful. Amara moved slowly through the glowing grasses, her massive silhouette calm but alert. The adult elephant lifted her trunk now and then, tasting the air, checking the scents on the wind. Every few steps she glanced back over her shoulder, her large amber eyes softening at the sight of the small shape struggling a few paces behind her. Keto, her only calf, barely a few months old, dragged his feet with tired breaths, his legs wobbling from exhaustion. They had been walking for hours, trying to catch up to the rest of their herd after becoming separated earlier that day. Ahead of them, faint impressions of large, round footprints stretched into the distance, the tracks of their family group. But those prints were growing lighter, harder to follow, as dust filled them and wind softened their edges. The older elephants had moved quickly, perhaps spooked by distant thunderstorms or the subtle presence of predators. Whatever the reason, Amara's low rumbles, calls deep and resonant, received no reply from the savanna. No answering rumble. No familiar footsteps returning. The herd was far ahead, too far to hear her voice. Keto's breaths came in little bursts. He tried to match his mother's pace, but his small frame trembled with each step. His ears flapped weakly, not in playfulness, but in fatigue. Amara slowed further, letting him catch up. She brushed the tip of her trunk along his back, a gentle reassurance. But the sinking sun cast long, dark shapes across the land, and with each passing minute, she sensed danger growing closer. Then the wind shifted. It wasn't dramatic, just a subtle change, a brief swirl that delivered a smell Amara recognized instantly. The scent of meat, fresh meat. Her ears widened, her tail stiffened. She turned her massive head, slightly scanning the tall grasses to their left. At first, there was nothing but the rhythmic sway of dry stalks. But then, movement. Soft, fluid, silent. A golden shape glided between the grass blades. Then another, and another. They were shadows with eyes reflecting the last light of the sun. A pride of lions moving low and deliberate, circling silently like ghosts. Their bodies blended perfectly with the savanna's hues, but their intent was unmistakable. Amara turned fully, placing herself between the danger and her calf. Her ears spread wide, her body grew visibly larger as she squared her stance. Her instincts screamed at her to protect the small life behind her. Keto didn't understand. He only saw his mother change posture. He continued stumbling along behind her, unaware of the jaws waiting for the weakest step. As the sky deepened into purples and indigo blues, one lioness surged forward. There was no warning growl, no sound, just an explosion of muscle and speed. She burst through the grass, like a bullet fired straight from the earth, her eyes locked on the smallest, most vulnerable target on the plains. Keto. The calf had no time to react. He cried out a shrill, panicked squeal when the lioness clamped her jaws around his hind leg. Her teeth sank deep into the tender muscle just above the joint, and Keto collapsed with a scream that tore through the savanna like a crack of lightning. Amara roared. The sound was not the low rumble she used to call her calf. It was a thunderous, explosive bellow, raw fury, fear, and a mother's unbreakable will fused into one. The lioness hesitated, but her grip remained locked. Amara charged. Her enormous feet pounded the earth, sending dust into the air. She swung her trunk downward with full force, striking the lioness in the ribs. The predator was lifted off the ground, thrown aside by the impact. She rolled once, twice, before scrambling away into the grass. The rest of the pride retreated just as quickly, melting back into the shadows. But the gleam of their eyes lingered. They weren't giving up. Not tonight. Keto tried to rise, his little body shaking violently. He placed weight on his injured leg and immediately collapsed again. A thin stream of blood slid down his gray skin, dripping onto the dry earth. Amara lowered her trunk and touched his side, sweeping carefully to assess the wound. His breath came fast and shallow. Every muscle trembled. And from somewhere beyond the grass, a lion's deep rumble resonated, a chilling reminder that the danger had not passed. The pride was waiting, watching, ready to strike again once darkness concealed them fully. Amara stood still for a long moment, surrounded by endless plains and gathering night. There was no herd to protect them, no towering trees to take refuge under, no rocky outcrop to hide behind. Just open land and predators that considered Keto's weakness an invitation. If she stayed here, her calf would die. Her gaze drifted toward the horizon. Far away, almost invisible in the fading light, she sensed something unusual drifting on the breeze, an unfamiliar smell. Smoke, metal, fuel, humans. Everything inside her said to turn away. Elephants avoided humans unless forced to confront them. Humans brought noise, disruption, danger. But tonight, none of that mattered. Because Keto was dying. Amara lifted her head, made a decision that went against every instinct her species had carried for thousands of years, and nudged her trembling calf gently. They moved. The sun dropped below the horizon, plunging the land into the velvet blackness of an African night. Crickets began their chorus. Hyenas laughed in the distance, and the little calf's footprints marked a fragile trail, one wobbling step at a time, across the earth as his mother guided him forward with her trunk pressed to his side. The savanna transformed into a world of shadows. Keto's breaths grew weaker, but he continued following the steady rhythm of his mother's steps. The pool of blood from his wound dripped intermittently, leaving dark marks along the path. Behind them, the lions reappeared. Their eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, always keeping their distance, but never disappearing. They weren't ready to give up. They never gave up, not when prey was injured, not when it was slowing down, not when it was this small. But Amara was not prey. She kept turning her head, listening, calculating. Her footsteps stayed strong. Her body shielded Keto from every direction she sensed danger. The night grew colder. Footstep by footstep they pressed on. Just as exhaustion threatened to take over both mother and calf, a sharp, brilliant beam of white light sliced through the dark. Amara froze. The light illuminated her massive form, outlining her tusks, her ears, her towering shadow that spread across the ground. The sound reached her next, a low mechanical growl, unnatural and rhythmic, nothing like the sounds of the wild. A jeep. The humans were coming. The engine rumbled louder as the vehicle drew closer, its headlights cutting a path through the night. Dust rose beneath its wheels. The lions disappeared immediately, slipping into the dark as if they had never been there at all. Amara stayed perfectly still. Keto, trembling violently, sank down onto his knees. Was the mother elephant right to trust that vehicle? Or did she gamble everything on the wrong kind of humans? Was it truly a ranger patrol? Or could it have been something far more dangerous, like poachers in disguise? Tell us what you think in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe before we move into the most intense part of the story. The Jeep's brakes screeched as the headlights blasted across Amara's massive form. Dust spiraled around the vehicle, drifting through the savanna night. The two rangers inside froze at the sight before them, an adult elephant blocking the road entirely. Her silhouette towering and unmoving, her body rigid, but not aggressive. Elias Mwangi, senior ranger of the Kijani Wildlife Unit, felt his pulse spike. He instinctively reached for the rifle strapped beside his seat, but stopped halfway, struck by the strangeness of her posture. She wasn't flaring her ears in challenge. She wasn't stomping. She wasn't trumpeting in rage. She stood still, eerily still, like a creature holding its breath. Then he saw her calf. A small gray body lay crumpled beneath her, partly shielded by her front legs. The calf's chest rose and fell in jerky, uneven motions. One hind leg was twisted at an unnatural angle, and a dark patch of blood glistened along the dusty ground beneath him. "God," Elias whispered. The other rangers seated beside him exhaled shakily. "Should we try to scare her off?" "No," Elias murmured. "No, look at her." His voice softened as instinct and experience took over. He pushed open the door, slowly raising both hands to show he carried no threat. "She's not here to fight." Stepping down onto the dirt, he approached one cautious footstep at a time, the wind, cold against his sweat. The Jeep's lights carved Amara's shape out of the darkness, illuminating the tension locked in every muscle of her body. Her ears lifted, her trunk hovered low, but she didn't charge. She didn't even shift her weight. She watched him, not with wild panic, but with something he had only ever witnessed in rare moments between elephants and the rangers who'd rescued them: desperation. Elias swallowed hard and motioned to his teammate. "Lower your gun," he ordered quietly. "All of you. Now." Behind him, doors opened slowly. 3 rangers emerged, rifles pointed toward the ground. They spread out instinctively but carefully, a semicircle leaving space, avoiding direct angles that might make Amara feel cornered. Elias moved closer until he could see the calf clearly. Blood stained the calf's gray skin and soaked into the dust. The wound was deep, too deep, the kind of tear only caused by a lion's jaws. He crouched slightly, careful not to appear predatory. "Easy, girl," he whispered. "Easy. We're here to help. You brought him to us, didn't you?" Amara shifted her weight, but did not step back. Her eyes, reflecting the headlights, glimmered with a clarity almost human. A ranger behind Elias whispered, "If that leg doesn't get sutured tonight, he won't make it until sunrise." Elias made his decision instantly. He raised his radio. "This is Elias. Emergency medical response. I need Dr. Naya here immediately. Repeat, immediate trauma intervention. Lion attack on a calf. Static." Then a voice crackled. "On our way. 10 minutes. 10 minutes." It felt like forever. The rangers mustered a controlled advance. Not toward Amara, but toward the calf, angling sideways, leaving Amara always a path of retreat. Elias kept his voice calm, steady. "We're going to help your little one. You just have to trust us." Whether elephants understood words was irrelevant. They understood tone, and Amara seemed to understand the intent behind his voice. Still, every step the men took made her shift protectively, enormous legs instinctively adjusting to keep her body between them and Keto. Her trunk hovered dangerously close. One wrong move, and she could crush a man in a heartbeat. But she didn't. She let them approach. A soft whine escaped from Keto, weak, thin, full of pain. His leg twitched, and he tried to lift his head. It fell back instantly. Elias knelt closer, grimacing at the sight. Muscle torn open. Blood matted around the wound. The calf was shaking in fear and shock. "We'll get you help," Elias murmured. The distant rumble of an engine grew louder. Moments later, another jeep arrived in a flurry of dust. Dr. Nia Okoye jumped out before the wheels fully stopped, her medical kit clutched to her chest. "Where is he?" she called, scanning the headlights' glare. Then she saw Amara. Oh, wow. "She brought him to us," Elias said. "She hasn't attacked. She's protecting, not threatening." Nia exhaled sharply. "Then let's not waste time." Under Elias's guidance, the Rangers carefully prepared a stretcher, a thick canvas sling designed for animal transport. They eased it toward the calf. Amara's trunk rose sharply, her body tensing. "It's okay," Elias said firmly. "We're not taking him away from you. We're taking him to safety." As if she understood, Amara lowered her trunk. Her breathing was loud and heavy, but she didn't charge. Working quickly, the team slid the stretcher beneath the calf. Keto whimpered, his entire body quivering as the fabric touched his wounded leg. Nia stroked his forehead gently. "You're okay, little one," she whispered. "Stay with us." With steady, coordinated movement, the Rangers lifted the stretcher and carried Keto to the back of the second jeep. Amara followed them, step for step. When they secured Keto inside and shut the metal bar across the back, she let out a low, trembling rumble, half fear, half plea. "We're not taking him away," Elias assured her. "Follow us. You can follow us." Amara did. The convoy moved slowly across the savanna, escorted by the towering shadow of the anxious mother. When they reached the Kijani Ranger outpost, a cluster of low buildings and floodlights, Amara stopped at the perimeter, watching every movement. Under the glare of the lamps, Keto was carried onto a thick, insulated mat laid over the ground. The night air cut sharply through the space, carrying the faint scent of dust and disinfectant. Amara positioned herself just outside the ring of floodlights. Her enormous frame cast a long, dark silhouette across the dirt. Though she stayed quiet, the tension radiating from her was unmistakable. Nia knelt beside the calf and began assessing the damage. The wound was deep, a brutal bite that exposed a section of tendon. She traced the torn muscle, her brow furrowing with concern. "The hind tendon is damaged," she said softly. "If we don't stitch it immediately, the leg may never function again." Elias nodded. "Tell us what you need." "Lighting, sterile water, suture kit, local anesthetic, a clean bandage, and eyes on every corner. Those lions will come looking." Her voice trembled only on the last sentence. The Rangers moved quickly, setting up lamps and securing the area with portable floodlights. One Ranger held a spotlight directly above the calf to give Nia a clear view. Another scanned the darkness with a thermal scope, searching for movement. The night vibrated with insect calls. The wind prickled with cold. Nia began to work. She started by flushing the wound with warm, sterile water. Blood washed away in thin streams, revealing the pale tendon beneath. The calf flinched, letting out a faint cry that pierced the hearts of every human present. And Amara heard it. Her reaction was instant. She surged forward, her feet thundering against the ground. The Rangers' tensed hands flying to their holsters, but Elias stepped out in front of her. "Easy," he shouted, hands raised high. "Easy, we're helping him." Amara stopped only a few feet away, her breath bursting from her trunk in deep, heavy blasts. Every sound from her calf tore at her instincts. She wanted to lift him, shield him, hold him close, but she forced herself to remain still. Nia continued her work, stitching the torn muscle layer by layer. The sutures were meticulous, steady, precise. The smell of antiseptic drifted through the air, mixing with the earthy scent of elephant and dust. Then a sound rippled through the darkness, a low, distant growl. Elias turned sharply. "They're here," he muttered. Two rangers swept their lights toward the savanna. Yellow reflections blinked back at them, half a dozen eyes hovering just beyond the floodlight's reach. The lions had followed Amara's trail. A lioness stepped a single pace forward, her body illuminated slightly by the edge of the light. Muscles rippled beneath her skin. Her gaze locked onto Quito, then flicked to Amara. The elephant lifted her head. A rumble began deep in her chest, a rolling thunder that grew louder, deeper, shaking the ground itself. She spread her ears wide. Her trunk curled upward. Her massive body swayed once. Then she trumpeted. The sound blasted across the plains like an explosion of raw power. The lioness froze her ears, flattening. After a tense beat, she backed away and disappeared into the dark. The others followed. Elias let out the breath he'd been holding. "Keep the lights bright, no shadows." Nia continued suturing without pause. Sweat dripped from her forehead despite the cold. Every few minutes, a soft whine escaped Quito's throat, each one making Amara lunge closer before stopping obediently at the boundary set by the rangers. "Almost there," Nia murmured. "Just a little more." Time stretched painfully. Minutes felt like hours. The lions circled but never crossed back into the light. Amara never moved from her watchful stance. The rangers, though shivering, stayed vigilant. At last, after what felt like an eternity, Nika tied the final stitch and leaned back, exhaling shakily. "He has a chance," she whispered. "A real chance." They wrapped the leg carefully, securing the bandage. A ranger placed a warm blanket across Quito's back. Another inserted a line to deliver fluids, helping stabilize his weakened body. The calf's breathing, once rapid and panicked, gradually slowed into a steadier rhythm. Elias looked up at Amara. The elephant had not moved for hours. She was soaked in sweat dust, clinging to her legs, her trunk hanging low with exhaustion. But her eyes remained fixed on her child. The savanna was quiet now. The lions, deterred by light and elephant fury, had slunk away to hunt elsewhere. The wind softened. For the first time since the nightmare began, relief washed over the humans. A trust formed in the darkest hours and strengthened by the shared will to keep a single fragile life alive. Night loosened its grip on the savanna slowly, as if morning itself were hesitant to disturb the fragile peace that had settled around the Kajani Ranger outpost. The eastern horizon shifted from black to violet, then to a muted rose. A thin line of gold pressed against the silhouette of sleeping acacias, and with it came the first breath of warmth since the long, harrowing night began. As dawn brightened, the outpost's floodlights flickered and dimmed, giving way to the gentle glow of morning. Faint bird song rose from the tall grasses beyond the fence, a soft, rhythmic chorus that replaced the tense silence of the night. It was the kind of sound that belonged to a peaceful world, not the battlefield of survival they had lived through just hours earlier. Inside the temporary treatment area, Quito stirred. His small gray body, wrapped in blankets and bandages, shifted weakly. For a moment, he lay still, his breath shallow and faint. Then a tremor ran through him. His eyelids fluttered. Slowly, as the light of dawn spilled across his face, the calf opened his eyes. At first, the world swam before him, shapes blurring in and out of focus. But then the bright morning sharpened, and he blinked again, more steadily this time. His trunk twitched. His ears gave a small, uneven flap. Elias, who had refused to sleep and had spent the entire night leaning against a post nearby, lifted his head. A tired smile softened his face. "He's waking," he whispered. Keto shifted his weight, trying to fold his legs beneath him. His muscles trembled under the effort. For a moment he faltered and sagged sideways, but something in him, some instinct deep and stubborn, pushed him to try again. He braced his front legs, pushed against the ground, and lifted. This time he managed to hold himself up. He swayed, his entire body wobbling, but he stayed standing. Though the calf was still weak, still bandaged, still struggling, the simple act of rising in the morning light meant only one thing: he had survived. Just a few steps away, beyond the low fence that bordered the treatment area, a massive silhouette waited. Amara. She had not moved from her place all night. Not when the lions circled. Not when the wind grew cold. Not when the men whispered, or when Nia stitched her calf's wounded leg. Her feet had stayed rooted exactly where she could see Keto close enough to reach him, if danger came far enough not to frighten the humans who fought to keep him alive. Now, in the warm glow of dawn, the elephant stepped closer. A low rumbling note rolled from her chest, so soft it was almost a sigh. It was a sound of relief, a sound mothers made when they saw their young breathing, after a night they were not certain the world would let them keep. Keto heard it. He turned his head slowly, unsteadily, and met his mother's eyes. When he did, Amara extended her trunk through the narrow gap between the fence rails. Her movements were slow and careful, as though afraid that the slightest touch might harm him. But when her trunk brushed gently across the top of his head, Keto leaned into it. It wasn't much, just a fragile nudge, a tiny shift of weight. But it was enough. Enough to communicate the primal understanding between them, and the connection that had pulled Amara through the dark savanna and pushed her to break every instinct that warned her to stay away from humans. Nia stepped closer, rubbing her sore eyes. "He's improving," she said quietly. "He's weak and he'll limp for a while, but he's going to make it." Elias nodded. His mother already knows. As if responding to his words, Amara gave another gentle rumble. Her trunk lingered against Keto's forehead until the calf, exhausted from standing, lowered himself back onto the blanket. But he was no longer limp, no longer fading. He was alive and ready to go home. Elias watched the pair in silence for a long moment. The golden morning washed over them, shaping their shadows into a single silhouette on the dirt. It was a scene unlike anything he had experienced in 20 years of wildlife patrol. Finally, he drew a slow breath. "It's time," he said. Nia lifted her eyes. "You're letting him go? He's standing. He can walk. And his mother." Elias looked toward the fence. "If we keep them apart longer than necessary, she might try to break through. And honestly, I don't think anything we have here can stop her." The rangers exchanged tired, knowing looks. Even exhausted Amara radiated an aura of unstoppable strength. She wouldn't attack unless threatened, that much was clear, but she also wouldn't tolerate being separated from her calf 1 minute longer than needed. Elias motioned to 2 rangers. "Open the gate." Slowly. No sudden moves. They nodded, unlocking the metal latch with deliberate care. The hinges creaked as the gate swung outward. Amara's ears rose, her eyes widening at the movement. Keto, sensing change, lifted his head again. Elias crouched beside him. "Come on, little one. Let's get you back to where you belong." He placed a hand gently on Keto's side and guided him toward the opening. The calf pushed himself upright once more. This time, he managed it faster, though his body still trembled. He limped, dragging his bandaged leg, but he moved, and that was enough. When he stepped through the gap in the fence, Amara closed the distance instantly, yet delicately, as though approaching the most fragile piece of her soul. She swept her trunk beneath Keto's belly to help support his weight, making sure he didn't fall. She nudged him upright, adjusted her stance to shield him, sniffed his bandaged leg with a deep inhale, as if memorizing the scent of the thing that had saved him and nearly taken him. Keto pressed himself against her leg, exhausted but comforted. The two elephants touched trunks repeatedly in a slow, rhythmic greeting, an unspoken language of relief, grief, gratitude, and overwhelming love. It was tender beyond words. Even the wind seemed to quiet for them. Elias stepped back, giving them space. "He's safe now," he murmured. When the reunion finally stilled, Amara lifted her head and turned toward the humans. Her gaze found Elias first. She stood completely still, weighing him with eyes that reflected both the wildness of her species and something deeper, something startlingly aware. With a soft exhale, she began walking toward him. Every ranger stiffened. "Hold," Elias whispered. "No one move." Amara approached slowly, each step deliberate. She stopped just a few feet away, close enough that Elias could feel the warmth radiating from her enormous form. Her trunk rose, hovering in the air between them. Elias held his breath. She lowered her trunk and brushed it gently against his open hand. The touch was warm, rough, trembling ever so slightly. And yet within that moment, there was an unmistakable message, one that required no words, no shared language. "Thank you." Elias swallowed hard, overwhelmed. "You're welcome," he whispered. The other rangers stood in reverent silence. They knew they had witnessed something rare, something that dissolved the invisible line separating humans from the wild, if only for a heartbeat. Amara gave one final nod, then turned away from them. She placed her trunk behind Keto's back, guiding him as they began their walk out of the outpost. Keto limped beside her small steps, growing steadier with every passing moment. They moved slowly, but with purpose, heading toward the endless expanse of golden grasses stretching into the horizon. Morning sunlight painted their bodies gold, outlining them in shimmering halos of warmth. By the time they reached the edge of the savanna, the sun was fully risen. There were no lions waiting, no shadows stalking them. The predators had retreated into the shade, giving the elephants safe passage under the bright new day. Amara paused once at the crest of a small slope. She looked back over her shoulder at the outpost, at the rangers still standing in silent awe, at the humans who had fought through fear and exhaustion to save her child. Then she turned, nudging Keto forward, and together they disappeared into the swaying grass. Their footprints remained behind for only a few minutes before the breeze erased them. Elias remained still long after they were gone. No one spoke. Words felt too small for what they had witnessed. It had been a night of violence and terror. A night when the line between life and death was as thin as the thread Dr. Nia used to stitch a torn tendon together. A night when humans, predators, and prey all converged in one fragile circle of time. But in that same night, they had seen trust, courage, a mother's love strong enough to challenge the laws written by nature itself. By noon, the savanna was shimmering. The sun hung high and merciless, pouring white heat onto the plains until the ground blurred with wavering mirages. The cool softness of dawn was gone, replaced by a dry, searing stillness. The only movement came from insects and the slow drift of vultures circling far above. Amara moved carefully through the brittle grass, her ears half fanned to release heat. Beside her, Keto limped his bandaged leg, lifting a little higher with each step to ease the pain. They had left the ranger outpost at first light, guided only by instinct and the faint memory of the direction their herd had taken days before. The calf was stronger than he had been the night before, but every step cost him effort. He paused often, his sides heaving as he tried to catch his breath. The gauze that wrapped his hind leg had already picked up dust and dried earth. Under the weight of the midday sun, the faint, lingering smell of dried blood rose more sharply into the air. It did not go unnoticed. Amara felt it before she fully understood it. A change in the wind. The subtle, unsettling shift from warm emptiness to something heavier, sharper. She raised her trunk and tested the air, inhaling deeply. There it was. Not the exact same musky musk she had sensed the night before, but close enough. Lions. Different individuals, different scent signatures, but the same danger. Her heart thudded once hard. She scanned the horizon. It looked as empty as it always did at midday, the heat reducing everything to bleached silhouettes. But Amara had not survived this long by trusting what her eyes alone could see. She listened. Somewhere behind them, grass whispered with movement. Soft, controlled. Not the random rustling of wind, but deliberate footfalls. Keto, oblivious to the nuance of sense and sound, tugged on her awareness with a quiet whine. He had stopped again, his injured leg shaking, his trunk drooping low. Amara turned to him, nudged his flank gently with her trunk, and urged him onward. She could not let him rest in the open. Not now. Not with that smell in the air. Several hundred meters away, beneath a scraggly umbrella thorn tree, another lion pride had been sprawled in the patchy shade, conserving energy during the worst heat of the day. They were half dozing, their bellies empty, their eyes half closed. Then the wind shifted. One lioness lifted her head, nostrils flaring. The scent of blood reached her old, dried, but still rich with promise. It mingled with the scent of calf, of vulnerability, of easy prey. She stood, muscles rippling beneath her tawny coat, and stared in the direction the wind had come from. A low grunt escaped her throat. Two other lionesses pushed themselves lazily to their feet, followed by a lean young male whose mane was just beginning to darken. Their afternoon rest was over. Without a sound, they slipped into the grass. They moved like shadows, sliding downhill, quiet, fluid, unseen. Step by step, they tracked the faint trail of blood and weakness, their bodies hugging the contours of the earth. The sun beat down on their backs, but the promise of an injured calf was worth the effort. Up ahead, Amos, one of the younger rangers, lifted his binoculars from the back of the jeep and frowned. "Movement 11 o'clock, he murmured. Elias, seated in the driver's seat, squinted toward the shimmering horizon. The outpost had agreed to let a team shadow Amara and Keto from a distance, just in case the savanna decided it wasn't done testing them. They stayed far enough back not to disturb the mother and calf, but close enough that they could still see them through glass. "What is it?" Elias asked. "Lions," Amos replied. "Not the same group from last night. There's a young male with them." Elias felt his mouth go dry. He raised his own binoculars and adjusted the focus. The view snapped into clarity, golden bodies sliding through tall grass, moving with deadly patience. And far ahead of them, two gray figures, one large, one small, struggling across the plains. His chest clenched. They've picked up the trail. Damn it. The lions were closing the distance faster than Keto could manage. Amara must have felt it too, because she suddenly veered, angling her course toward a scatter of low rocks jutting from the ground nearby. It wasn't much, just an uneven rise, some boulders, pockets of broken terrain. But to an elephant, it was a tactical advantage. Lions preferred open ground, where their speed and coordination mattered. Rocks complicated the attack. Amara pushed on, ignoring the strain in her own legs. Keto limped harder, each step heavier than the last. He stumbled once and nearly fell, catching himself at the last second. His breathing came in sharp, little pants. Behind them, the sound of grass parting grew louder. Closer. Amara swung her head around ears, lifting trunk curling. The tension in the air had turned from vague threat to immediate danger. Then the first lioness sprang. She burst from the grass in a blur of tan and sinew claws, tearing at the ground as she charged straight for Quito. Her eyes were locked on his wounded leg, her jaws parted in anticipation. Amara pivoted with astonishing speed for an animal her size. The sun flashed off her tusks as she swung her whole body between Quito and the oncoming threat. Her trunk curled and she trumpeted a harsh, furious blast that tore the quiet afternoon apart. The lioness skidded, her momentum checked by the sudden wall of gray muscle and rage towering over her. She feinted to one side, looking for an opening, but Amara lunged one massive foot, striking the ground inches from the predator's head. The lioness retreated a few steps, growling. From the opposite side, the young male appeared, shoulders bunched, eyes calculating. He hadn't charged yet, but he circled testing angles, searching for a weakness in Amara's protective stance. Quito backed away in panic, his rear scraping against a narrow gap between two rocks, his small body wedged there, trapped. He trumpeted in fear, a high breaking sound. The lions heard it. Their focus sharpened. "They're flanking her," Amos said, his voice tight. "They're going to try to split her attention. Not if we get there first." Elias turned the key. The Jeep roared to life. He slammed his foot down and the vehicle surged forward, bouncing hard over the uneven earth. Amos grabbed onto the roll bar as the engine howled and dust billowed behind them. Two more Rangers clung to the back rifles, slung but pointed skyward. They weren't here to shoot the lions, unless there was no other choice. They were here to scare them off. The sound of the engine cut through the savanna heat like a buzzsaw. The lions' ears snapped back in annoyance, their heads turning toward the rising dust. They were used to vehicles, but not charging vehicles. Not vehicles that came straight toward them with unbroken momentum. Elias honked the horn, the blaring note echoing across the plains. He didn't slow down. At the last moment he swerved, driving the Jeep in a wide arc between Amara and the circling predators. The lions growled, backing off, their frustration palpable. Now he shouted. One of the Rangers in the back hoisted a flare launcher and fired. A blazing streak of red cut across the sky, hissing and sputtering. It arced overhead and burst into a shower of light some distance away. For the lions, the combination of humans' noise light and a full-grown elephant defending her calf was too unpredictable. Too risky. They hesitated, snarling, and then retreated, fading back into the grass in a series of reluctant backward steps. Still, they didn't go far. Not yet. "Keep it running," Elias told Amos, circling the Jeep once more to maintain a barrier. "We'll give her time to move." Amara stood tall-chest, heaving her trunk, hovering protectively over the gap in the rocks where Quito was wedged. She took a step forward, then another, slowly easing her calf out from his stone refuge. He trembled, but obeyed, clinging to her side. Elias watched them closely, his own heart racing. "You're not alone out here," he whispered under his breath. "Not today." After several long minutes, the lions finally gave up, slipping deeper into the savanna's shimmering heat. Only when he was certain they were gone did Elias ease the Jeep back and let the engine idle. Quito hadn't taken another injury, but the terror of the chase had drained what little strength he had left. He pressed into Amara's leg, almost leaning on her to stay upright. She wrapped her trunk around his shoulders, as if trying to hold his fear inside her instead. Overhead, the sky began to change. Clouds rolled in from the west, slow at first, then faster, heavy-bellied and dark. The blue of the sky dimmed into a cool, warning gray. A gust of wind rushed across the plains, carrying the thick scent of impending rain. Elias squinted at the gathering clouds. "Storm's coming," he muttered, "and not a small one." He lifted his binoculars again, scanning the horizon, then glanced at Quito's unsteady gait. The ground hard and cracked now would turn to mud soon enough. And if these two were struggling in dry conditions, a full savanna downpour would make their path 10 times harder. He climbed back into the jeep. "We'll shadow them from farther back," he told his team. "They need space, but if this storm gets ugly, we may have to intervene again." As the first distant rumble of thunder rolled across the sky, Amara angled her body, feeling the weight of the coming rain. Her skin prickled with the change in air pressure. Seasonal storms were a part of her life, but Quito's weakened state made everything different now. The first fat drop splashed onto the dusty earth, leaving a dark mark. Then another. Then dozens. Within minutes, the savanna was no longer shimmering from heat. It was rippling under the assault of heavy, unrelenting rain. The ground darkened and softened, turning from hard-packed earth into slick mud. Water pooled in shallow depressions. Grass bowed under the weight of raindrops. Amara slowed, choosing each step carefully. Quito's injured leg slipped several times, his foot sliding out from beneath him. Each time she was there, pressing her trunk against his side, lowering her shoulder, anything to keep him from falling. The bandage around his leg became soaked and stained, but it held. Thunder cracked overhead, startling both of them. With vision obscured by sheets of rain scent, muddied by wet earth, and sound drowned beneath the roar of the storm, finding the herd became nearly impossible. The tracks they might have followed were washed away in minutes. Every path looked the same. Every direction dissolved into gray. They needed shelter. Amara raised her head, scanning what little she could see through the deluge. She knew this land. She had walked it many seasons. Somewhere nearby there was a cluster of rocks that formed a partial overhang, a place where wind and water couldn't reach as savagely. She walked. Quito staggered beside her, his small frame shivering as the cold rain seeped into his skin. His leg throbbed, his ears drooped, but he continued trusting the shape of his mother's massive form in front of him, the steady reassurance of her presence. At last, Amara spotted what she was searching for, a jumble of weathered stone stacked by time and erosion into a rough shelter. It wasn't a cave, but it was enough. The rocks jutted at odd angles, forming a shallow alcove where the rain struck only the outer edges. She guided Quito inside. He sank down almost immediately, folding his legs beneath him and curling his trunk close to his chest. He was shaking from cold, from fear, from exhaustion. Amara moved to stand between him and the storm, her bulk shielding the worst of the wind and rain. Water ran in rivulets down her back, but inside the little clearing of stone, the air was calmer, the ground less sodden. They were not alone for long. The storm herded life together. A small group of impala, eyes wide and ears twitching, darted toward the rocks and huddled near the opposite side of the shelter. A pair of warthogs squeezed in, snorting softly. Even a tiny soaked bird fluttered under a low ledge, feathers puffed in indignation at the sudden flood. For a brief, surreal moment, prey and giant fragile calf shared the same small haven, all equally humbled by the sky's fury. A young impala, its coat still slightly fluffier than the adult's, edged a bit closer to Quito, curiosity winning over fear. The calf lifted his head slowly, blinking at the delicate creature standing only a few feet away. Their eyes met. For a heartbeat, the savanna's harsh laws felt suspended, replaced by something gentler, something almost innocent. The impala flicked its ears and bounded back to its herd. High above, the storm's voice began to soften. The rain that had pounded the earth in violent sheets eased into a steady, cleansing shower. Clouds thinned, letting muted light seep through. The air felt cooler now, washed of heat and dust. Several kilometers away, back near the ranger outpost, Elias leaned over a table where a map of the reserve lay pinned beneath rocks and a pair of binoculars. He and his team had retreated temporarily to avoid crowding Amara during the storm, but they hadn't stopped watching over her. A drone hovered high above the savanna, its small camera surveying the land. On the monitor before them, Elias could see the rough silhouette of two elephants, tucked in beside rocks, surrounded by blurs of other animals taking refuge. There, he said, pointing, they found shelter. That storm washed out every track, Amos muttered. How is she supposed to find the herd now? We'll help, Elias replied. He traced a finger along a faint line on the map, a route the herd often took during the rainy season when water collected in seasonal streams and lowland pans. Elephants were creatures of memory. They followed paths their ancestors had walked for generations. If she hears them, Elias mused, she'll know where to go. Later, when the rain had dwindled to a mist and the clouds began to part, Amara stepped out from under the rocks. Keto rose slowly, legs stiff but functional, leaning heavily against her. The world smelled different now, wet and green with a heavy scent of damp soil. She lifted her head and listened. At first, all she heard was the drip of water falling from leaves and stones. Then faintly, beneath the fading echo of the storm, a sound reached her. A low rolling rumble, distant, familiar. Elephants. She stilled, turned her ears toward it. The sound came again, a deeper, layered chorus this time, the overlapping calls of several adults carried over long distances by the moist air. Keto's ears perked. He raised his head, alert despite his fatigue. Amara responded with a rumble of her own, deep and resonant. It vibrated through her chest and sent subtle tremors into the ground. She waited. A moment later, an answer came. The direction was clear now. Somewhere beyond the soft hills and the thinning veil of rain, their family was moving. Their voices, amplified by the wet earth and heavy atmosphere, carried further than they would have on a dry day. Amara nudged Keto gently. It was time to move again. They stepped out onto the softened ground, the mud grabbing at their feet, but no longer threatening to swallow them. The sky above was a patchwork of blue and gray, with sunlight beginning to break through in strips. They walked. Through the fading drizzle, through the quiet aftermath of the storm, through a land that smelled of renewal, not death. By the time the horizon paled with the first hints of another dawn, they had covered more ground than anyone watching from afar would have thought possible for a calf so recently injured. And there, etched into the damp earth ahead of them, were the signs they needed: large, fresh footprints, broken branches oozing sap where trunks had stripped leaves, lingering, heavy scent. The herd had passed through here. Amara quickened her pace, energy returning to her step. Keto followed doggedly, his limp still visible, but less pronounced. The faint aches in his muscles were drowned out by something stronger: hope. As the sun finally rose, fully casting the savanna in a new clean light, the shape of other elephants appeared in the distance. The matriarch emerged first, towering and composed, her presence radiating authority. She lifted her head, trunk raised, testing the air. Her ears twitched. Amara let out a greeting, a long, rolling call filled with relief and suppressed fear. The matriarch rumbled back, stepping forward to meet them. When Amara and Keto reached the fringes of the herd, several younger elephants moved aside, curious and excited. The matriarch circled them slowly, trunk exploring the air around Keto's bandaged leg. She inhaled the faint scent of humans and medicine that clung to him. For a long, tense moment, she was silent. Then she exhaled softly and rumbled her acceptance. The calves of the herd rushed over, surrounding Keto with nudges and curious touches. They brushed him with their trunks, welcoming him back into the only world he had ever known. He responded hesitantly at first, then with growing enthusiasm, his fear dissolving under the comfort of familiar bodies and sounds. The adults closed ranks around them, a living wall of gray, strong and unyielding. In the distance, standing atop a low rise with binoculars pressed to his face, Elias watched. He saw Quito enveloped by his own kind, limping but safe, his small frame dwarfed by the gentle hulks of relatives who would now move as one to protect him. He saw Amara take her place beside the matriarch again, no longer a solitary figure in an indifferent landscape, but part of something larger, older, and far more enduring. Amos lowered his own binoculars. "We did it," he said quietly. He made it back. Elias didn't answer immediately. His chest felt too tight, his throat too thick. Finally, he let out a long breath. That night, he said when she brought him to our door, "I thought we were just saving a calf." And now Amos asked. Elias watched as the herd began to move on, disappearing slowly into the swaying grass. "Now I think," he murmured, "they might be saving us too." He let the binoculars hang against his chest and stared at the emptying horizon. "When we protect them," he thought, the words forming clearly in his mind, "that they teach us how to be better humans." Behind him, the other rangers were already talking about corridors of safe passage, about minimizing conflict, about a new project Elias had named the Dry Season Elephant Safe Route Initiative. There would be meetings, funding proposals, arguments with authorities. But right now, in this moment, it was simpler than that. Right now, it was just a herd of elephants walking into the golden light of morning. A small calf limping proudly between giants. A mother who had broken every rule of the wild to save her child. And the endless savanna watching in quiet approval as the story came full circle and faded back into the rustling grass. Thank you so much for watching and sharing this journey with us. Your support means everything and helps these stories reach more people around the world. If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support truly keeps these stories alive.